Hello coders, welcome back to the new video on CSS 3. This is our second video in this series of learning web development. Earlier we have seen HTML5 as the first course in this series of web development. So in case you have not seen that video, you can find link to that video in the eye icon displayed now in the top right corner of the screen. I have also added link to that video in the description as well. So let us begin with CSS 3. So we are going to cover a lot of topics in the CSS, and those topics are introduction, uses, advantages, how we can write CSS, so syntax, how different selectors can be there, and different formatting like setting texts or fonts. Also how you can set display properties, okay, set overflows and outline and even position properties. So all of this we are going to learn. Plus we are going to learn about layers, pseudo classes, pseudo elements, opacity, gradients, and most importantly the new features which have been added into CSS 3, that was for drop shadow, 2D transformation, 3D transformation, and transitions, animations, and so on. Another important topic that we will be discussing is about media queries, and this is something that is really relevant when we are required to develop pages responsive and adaptive. So which means that your website will have a certain look on devices with larger display like your desktop or laptop, and it will have a certain different look on other devices like mobile, wherein your screen size will be relatively smaller. So using CSS you can technically arrange all the web components or the HTML components of your web page differently on different set of screens. So we'll begin with the introduction part of CSS 3. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It is a presentational technology, and CSS was introduced by W3C, stands for World Wide Web Consortium, in year 1996. This consortium set the guideline rules for HTML5 as well. They also help introducing new tags into HTML5. They also introduced few more aspects into CSS 3 as well. CSS beautifully separates presentation and the content. So the web developer can concentrate more on creating core structure using HTML and maintain aesthetics of a web page using CSS separately. So this makes your code more maintainable and simple to use and learn. With the use of CSS, HTML also becomes very simpler because you separate the styling of your web page into separate CSS files. Then we will see who can learn this course. So anybody who has interest in learning web technology can learn this course or learn this tutorial. If you're a student and have CSS as part of your syllabus, you can definitely learn this course. And in case you're a professional who also has basic knowledge of HTML, then you can also take this course. In case you're willing to switch your career from certain technology to web technology, then you also can learn this course. We have tried to cover most of the important points related to CSS. This is going to be an extensive course in CSS, but what is needed from your end is time, patience, and dedication. You will also require to do practice, and after that only you'll be able to complete this course successfully. Most important thing is for you to complete this tutorial, because we are going to cover most of the important topics related to CSS. By the end of this video, you will be able to create beautiful web pages using HTML and CSS. So let us see what is exactly the use of CSS. Okay, as we discussed earlier, CSS is basically used to define styling rule of your web page, and these styles are applied to your DOM element or to your HTML tags. Best part of CSS is that same style rules can be assigned to multiple elements. Okay, so when you create a rule X, okay, that rule can be assigned to your H1 tag or your B tag or your P tag. Another important aspect is if you have, let's say, one rule and you have created, let's say, 10 or 15 different rules, these same set of rules can be written into a single file, let's say style.css, and this CSS file can be called on your multiple pages. Okay, for example, I'm calling one HTML page, the file name is index.html, and the other one is, let's say, contact.html. Okay, so on both of these pages you can use the same style sheet, so the basic look that you have created for your this page can be applied immediately to this page as well. So all the common elements that you have inside of your these pages, the style sheet will remain same to both the pages. Okay, so similarly you can have n number of pages, and the same file can be used there. On your web page you can have multiple style sheet also. Okay, so you can have this style sheet, plus you can have, let's say, one more style sheet, and you may call it as, let's say, default.css. okay, using CSS you can style dynamic states of elements as well. For example, on hovering on a certain HTML you can have a certain style applied to it. For example, you can have a link, okay, one hyperlink, and when I hover over this link it will have, let's say, underline to the font. Okay, and when I click that link, then maybe you can change color of that link. So these kind of dynamic state changes can be made more visible using style sheets. Using style sheets you can change position of the elements as well. Okay, so in case your document has, let's say, this element 1 and there is another element over here, okay, you can change position of this second element or the first element depending on your choice, or depending how you want to present that information on the web page. You can also transform elements. For example, in case you have a certain image, you can scale down or scale up that image, or you can tilt that image, okay, and display something like this. So there are a lot of possibilities that you can achieve using CSS. Okay, with the help of CSS3 you can create a lot of good animations and transition effects to your HTML elements as well. So what are advantages of CSS? With the help of CSS, as you add CSS to your web pages, your pages becomes faster, or your pages load faster. What is the reason for that? Because we know that we can write CSS codes into separate files. Okay, these files, once called on the browser, these files can be cached. Okay, so your browser will make a local copy of your CSS style sheet. This is one reason. Another reason is, in case you write inline HTML, instead of writing this code into files, your inline code becomes part of your web page. So that page may not get cached, especially if it is a dynamic page like PHP or ASPX, which is a .NET page. So in that case, that page won't be cached. Always remember, only static resources like images, CSS, JS file or HTML page, only these type of static resources gets cached by the browser. It can apply superior styles to your HTML code to make your HTML pages more beautiful. Also, applying the style sheets and writing codes is quite time saving, because you have style rules in a separate file. The code becomes more easy to maintain, and because of modern code related to media queries, CSS basically gives you multiple device compatibility as well. So that is the most important advantage of using CSS. Now let us see in what different ways we can write CSS style rules. So there are three ways using which we can write CSS style rules. Most common is the inline style sheet, but this is something that we should always avoid because it increases size of your HTML page. So this is one sample code. So as we can see, your CSS code has become part of your HTML page completely. So this has obviously increased size of your web page, but in certain cases you can write code like this. So you can make use of style attribute, okay, and after equal to, inside of these double quotes, you can write your CSS style rules. In CSS, each style rule is basically a pair of property and value. So if this is your property, then you can specify a colon, then you can write your property value, and after that you can write a semicolon. So each pair is separated by a semicolon. So here color is the property name, and this is the hex color code is the value of this property color. Similarly, font size is the property and 18 pixel is the value of this property. So this style is basically applied to this HTML element. Okay. So output of this particular code is this. So this particular text which was inside of your p tag will be displayed like this. This is red color and the font size is 18. Okay, and it is displayed like this because of your this styling color. Otherwise it would have just simply displayed it into black color. Second way is using the embedded style sheets. You can have your CSS rules written inside of style tag, okay, either inside of head, or you can write it inside of body tag as well, but usually it's preferred that you write your CSS code inside of your head tag. Okay, so by the time your page get loaded, browser will have information, or the rendering engine will have information that these style sheet rules I need to apply on these elements. And on a single page you can have any number of style tags. There's no limit on it. But the disadvantage of using embedded style sheets is that it can have its effect on the same document only, as in if this is your page, okay, and inside of your head tag of this page, okay, you have written your style sheet code, okay, like this style, okay, it's an ending clause, and maybe after this head closing you have your body tag over here. Okay, so whatever the rules that you define over here will be applicable to this page only. Okay, so these rules will not be visible on some other page. Okay, so this is one major disadvantage of embedded style sheets. The code is not reusable. Okay, so this is one example. So you can assume that this style sheet code I have written inside one head tag, okay, and to the body and p tag this set of CSS rules will be applied. So this is how it will look. This is your body tag, which is marked into red color, and then you have this p element, okay, which basically has background color of slight gray. Now notice this particular text kodegod.com is in red because I'm assuming that inside of this p tag I have a style attribute wherein I have specified color as hexadecimal value of red, like this, and I have my text kodegod.com here, and then a closing p tag. So it is almost similar to the code that we have seen in the previous case, like this. Okay, now we'll see the third type and the most important type of writing CSS style code, which is external style sheets. Okay, and most important advantage of this type of writing is that the CSS code written inside of external CSS file can be applied to many pages, which makes your code reusable, extensible, and your same file can have multiple style sheet rules written into separate documents as well. As I mentioned earlier, one page can have multiple CSS files called on that page, and those same files can be accessed via different pages also. So there are two ways in which you can do this. One is by linking the CSS file, and other one is importing. Okay, so let us see how this works. So linking is basically done using the link tag, okay, and this basically calls your external file. So inside of your head tag you can use this particular code. You can have your link tag wherein you can mention the rel as style sheet and refer the file name. So this file is going to have your CSS style rules. Okay, other form is writing the import tag at the rate import, and this rule can be written inside of style tag. Additional information, it can be written inside of a CSS file as well. Only disadvantage there is that HTML page will first call CSS file 1, and in case this file has this import tag or import rule inside it, then it will call that second file. So the rendering engine will have to wait for this file to arrive. So by that time user might not see the correct style rules. Okay, so it's better that we write the import rule inside of style tag, which can be inside of your head tag. Okay, as I discussed, you can write import rule in another style sheet as well. So you can specify something like this. We need to be additionally careful while specifying path inside of CSS file, because that CSS file might have called using some different path also. Okay, so this path will be dependent on path of this file. Now we'll learn about the basic syntax of a CSS file. There can be two parts. Okay, so the first most important part is the selector. Okay, as in where exactly these set of rules will be applied, on which particular element these set of rules be applied. So this selector is really important. So one example is P is the P tag. Okay, so these set of rules will be applied to tag P. So wherever in your HTML you are going to have mention of P tag, so these rules will be applied to it. So your page can have multiple P tags also. Okay, so every time a P tag is called, there this code will be applied, or these styles will be applied. Okay, so here is one example. It's similar to what we have seen earlier. We can quickly check how we can write comment inside of CSS code. So you can use standard /star and //. So whatever that comes inside of these two character sets, that will be commented and won't be used as the part of your CSS styling rules. So commenting is quite useful in case your CSS file has multiple segments. Maybe you can have a footer section, or maybe header section, or the menu section, and you can have those sections clubbed together and have a title added with the help of comments. So the style sheet rules, or the rules that you're writing, becomes very easy to find. The next is about the selectors, and which is most important point, because this is how the CSS rules will be applied to the elements. Okay, so selectors basically used to select elements to which you want to apply the certain style. So there are a few types of selectors. The most common is the universal selector, which is denoted by star. So when you write star and then inside of parentheses you write your CSS rules, so to all the elements these default rules will be applied. Okay, so when I say star, we are talking about all the elements on the page. So this is ideally very useful, especially when you want to ensure that your all the HTML elements have certain default behavior in terms of styles. So this can help you reduce cross-browser compatibility issues. Cross-browser compatibility issues is something that, though your same code will be called on different browser when you're trying to access that page, just because of the difference between rendering engines, your page might look a little different, or a certain tag or a certain CSS rules might not get applied on the certain browser version. So in that case, having these kind of common rules or common default rules for all the browsers can be helpful. You can also write the CSS style rules on the element type selector, wherein you specify the element type instead of star, what we have written here. So element type selector matches every instance of the element in the document. So this is what we have seen the example in terms of universal selector, and this is the example of element type selector, wherein you can specify your HTML elements like this. Okay, in case you have multiple elements and you want the same rule to be applied to multiple elements, you can write that with the help of comma operator So let's say for p and div tag, I'm applying this styling rule. So you can have n number of element type selector like this. Plus you can use combinations of style selectors as well. Okay, like this I have written star, p and div. Of course it doesn't make any sense over here, because when I say star it will also include p and div, but it makes sense when we have other type of selectors. So continuing further, we have id selector. Okay, so id selectors, basically you define that with the help of hash symbol, and then you can have your id value. Okay, that is the id of an html element. So id is the attribute of html element. So whatever value that you specify, that value can be written along with the hash character. So something like this. So div code can be one HTML element into my HTML page, and I can specify a certain style rules to it. So what I've done is I have written hash character and the ID value. Then in terms of class selector, we can use the dot operator. Okay. So in HTML we have one class attribute. Okay. So for example, I'm writing p space class equal to CLR red. Okay, that is, let's say, a clear red. Okay, so this class name can be anything. Then inside of this p statement, I'm writing, let's say, kodegod.com, and then I'm closing this p tag. So here the selector is this class name. Okay, so when I'm writing dot, so whatever we refer after this dot will be considered as a class name, and the rendering engine will look for the element where the class is specified as CLR red. This class can be applied to multiple elements. Okay, so to all those multiple elements, this particular style sheet rule will be applied. Again, we can have other type of selector here with the help of comma. Then we have descendant selector. So this is the one type of select element that is descendant of another element. So when we have, let's say, one p tag, and inside it, let's say you have a span tag. Okay, so what I can do is, so this is span tag, so what I can do is p space span. Okay, so these style rules will be applied to this span tag only, which is inside of your p tag. Okay, and you can write any labels. Okay, like for example, you have a body tag. Okay, of course here it doesn't make any sense, or I can write a div tag as well. Okay, so div p span. Okay, so your span tag is, let's say, closing here, span tag, then you have your closing p tag. Okay, so this is closing here, and then you have, let's say, a closing div tag. Okay, and finally a closing body tag. Okay, so here what we can do is we can write rules as div space p space span. Okay, like this. Now if your code has a p tag which is not technically inside of a div tag, so in that case these rules will not be applied. Okay, so this is a descendant selector. Okay, here is one example. I am here talking about one OL tag which specifically has class my class. Okay, and if there is a li tag inside of this particular selector, and then another a inside of your li tag, only then this particular rule will be applied to the a element. Okay, so we are talking about something like this: ol class equal to my class. Okay, inside this element if I have li tag, and inside this li if I have a tag. Okay, and then whatever the code for a tag. Okay, I'm closing this li tag. Okay, and finally closing this ol tag. Okay, so only in this case this rule will be applied. Okay, then there is a child selector wherein you can have all the children inside of your parent tag. Okay, so to all the children element, these rules will be applied. Okay, and this can be denoted using the greater than symbol. Then you have adjacent sibling selector, and syntax is basically using the plus operator. You can have both the siblings mentioned. So here is one example. So h1 and p, here basically these set of rules will be applied. So this can be applied only when you have let's say h1 tag, okay, like this, and then immediately you have a p tag. Okay, only in this case these rules will be applied. So this particular case is strict, okay, because we are assuming that it has to be immediately next to each other. In the case of general sibling selector, you can use this tilde sign, and it's not a strict mode. So if this is your div tag, okay, and there is another tag inside here, okay, maybe one or more tag, even in that case these style rules will be applied. Okay, so this is a less stricter mode. Okay, but just because these siblings are adjacent to each other, maybe not exactly next to each other, but just because they are falling under a common parent, still these style sheet rules will be applied. Then we have a attribute selector. This selects elements with specific attribute or attribute with specified value. Okay, these are basically written inside of square brackets. Okay, you can also write something like this. For example, to a checkbox you can write a required as the attribute name. You can also specify something like this, that value is equal to 10. Okay, so you can write key value pair as well. So whatever the style sheet rules you specify will be applied to all the elements holding attribute value with the value 10. Okay, and in case you don't specify any value, wherever these attributes are mentioned, those style sheet rules will be applied. This is one example where I have not specified the value, just the attribute name, and this is another example where the attribute is mentioned along with its value. Okay, in the previous example I think I have not mentioned double quote over here, so these double quotes are required. So with this example, it will select all the elements where the attribute and value matches exactly as specified in the selector. So if these are few HTML tags that I have, okay, so if you notice, I have created one CSS rule where I'm writing for equal to value is rd female. So we are talking about this particular element. Okay, so this rule will be applied to this element. Okay, so if you notice, these two radios have been rendered because of this input type radio, and then we have a label. So this is the rd male value for this particular element, and then there is this another value wherein we have specified for equal to rd female. Because of this matching of attribute and value, this rule will be applied. So we have just changed the color, so you can notice that this particular label is into a different color. So in case of this particular type of selectors, you can have this tilde sign. Okay, and it can be applied only when you have a certain style rule, but it needs to have some other value but with some additional information. Okay, so here we have written the class 2, but it will be only true because some additional value is there. Okay, so it is basically checking the approximate values, and in case you have some partial information there, in those cases you can write this particular rule. Okay, but there could be very rare cases where this kind of rules will be required, maybe in case you are working on some really complex data values, and in those cases maybe you can use this kind of attribute selectors. So here if you notice, because of this rule, this particular element has got selected and the CSS rule is applied to it. Then we have a slight variation in this attribute selector where you can use pipe attribute. So this basically selects all element whose attributes has a hyphen separated list of values. So if you notice here, I'm writing class pipe equal to tech. So wherever I have this tech as a part of the value, so here and here, so in those cases the style sheet rules have got applied. Okay, then we have one more type wherein I can use this particular sign. So this basically selects all elements whose attributes value starts with the specified value. So here is one example. So I'm writing a href, then this symbol of mine and equal to this. So wherever I have this matching text, okay, as the initial part of the value, so value has to match in the beginning only. So if you notice, I have https, okay, colon slash slash. So this won't be selected, only these two will be selected because of this https that we have. Okay, so this is the first element, this is the second element, third element has not got selected. Then we can use star operator. So this selects elements whose attribute value contains the specified value, and it can be at any place, not necessarily in the beginning. So here we can see that we have specified this particular keyword, so because this is matching here and here as well, so both of these elements have got selected. In the earlier example, we had it to be matched in the beginning, but here with the help of star you can have it mentioned and it will select the matching elements wherever the string is matching. Alright, so now let us see how we can try out the rules that we have seen so far in terms of CSS style sheets. So what I have done is, now I have opened the previous files that we have seen in the HTML5 tutorial. So this was our project file. So if you notice, in this head tag I have already written this style sheet code. So this is one way of writing CSS style rules. Other way is to write inline. So I am writing one CSS rule to the h1 tag. So let's say color colon f0f. Okay, so if I refresh, so you can notice that the color of this particular HTML element has got changed. Now one interesting thing that we can do is, if I write the same code here in the head tag inside the style tag, okay, like this, I am writing selector as h1. Okay, so you'll notice something. I am changing the color to, let's say, 00f. So if I refresh, so you will not notice any difference over here. The reason is, inline style sheet rules or inline CSS rules are given preference over the style tag CSS rules and also above the external CSS file rules. So if I just remove this part, okay, so you can see that a different color will be applied to the h1 tag. Okay, so I'll just undo it for now. Okay, so if I refresh, the original pink color is displayed. Then we can write the similar code to the h2 tags, okay, like this. I'll remove this one. So when I refresh, so you can notice this code related to h2 tag is added to the registration and login tag as well. So these keywords or this text was in h2 tag. Okay, so if you notice at the bottom we have this text which is into h2 tag here. Okay, now because this color is same, what I can do is I can write it like this. Okay, so even with that it won't make any difference in my output. So we can write a selector like this about tags using the comma separated values. Okay, and another way that we can do is write this whole code inside of one external file. Okay, so I have removed it now. When I refresh, the code related to these tags have gone. Even the font family that we had set is also gone. Only this has remained. The reason is we have written the code inline, so I have removed it as well. Okay, so let us try to write this CSS code into external style sheet. So we can do that using the link tag. Okay, so this code has come up automatically. So I can specify the file name. Let's say content slash stylesheet.css. Okay, and then I'll create a new file. I'll paste my CSS style code over here and then save the file with name stylesheet.css inside of the content folder. Okay, so when I save, I need to specify that I need to use extension as CSS. So you can see that the file has got stored. Okay, let me just format this. Okay, so this looks a little neat. And then we have our h1 and h2 tag. Okay, now this separate file is created. Okay, so when I refresh, okay, so something is wrong. We need to figure out that. So when I refresh, the code is not getting applied. So we can check that the file name is same or not. So stylesheet.css is the name of the file, and we are specifying the code as content slash stylesheet.css. Let me just copy the file name, and maybe let's see it is matching with the file name or not. So when I say file save as, okay, so inside of the content folder, I'm just spacing it properly. It is asking me to replace. I'm saying yes. Okay, so even with that, the problem has not got solved. So maybe the problem is with the path. So what we can do is we can go to view source. Okay, and if we just try to click on the CSS reference that we have. Okay, see, if you notice that the reference has not come here, reason is this particular file was not saved. Okay, you can notice this particular sign over here. So what I can do is I can just save this. Okay, and when I hit the refresh, okay, so the style sheet has got called, and the changes are reflecting now. Okay, and the style sheet rules have got applied. So if you just refresh this source as well, you can notice that this particular code has come. To check whether the file is correctly mentioned or not, what you can do is you can just click on this link. So if this opens your CSS file, that means your file path was correct. Otherwise it will give you 404 error, that is the file not found. Okay, so maybe in that case you will be required to set the path correct in the HTML file, and after that it should work fine. Alright, so let us continue with what we were doing. So we have this separate file now, and you can notice that because we had also removed the inline CSS rule for this particular tag, so it is now showing in the blue color only. So just for your understanding, let me just try to change this color a little when I refresh. So you can notice this slight difference in the color. Maybe let me try selecting some other color. Okay, so you can notice these colors are changing. We can have separate color for h1 and h2 tag. So I can say this as the color. When I hit refresh, you can see different color is being applied. Now let us see how we can play around the different class selectors. So let me write one class selector attribute id equal to, let's say, footer element. Let me just copy this part. So this is name of, or this is ID of this particular tag, and then we have, let's say, let me select one more element wherein I can specify the class. So let's say to this p tag I'm writing class, let's say description. Okay, if I refresh the page, there won't be any change because the style sheet rules are not applied. So this particular element is the ID, so I can write hash sign, so that will signify that it's a ID of a HTML element. So again, let's say I'm specifying color to this element, let's say AAA. Okay, so when I refresh, so you can notice the color of this particular small tag has got changed. Then I can write the second selector, which is the class selector, using the dot operator, and the name of the class was description. Okay, there again let's say I'm specifying the color. Okay, so in this case, let's say change the color slightly to, let's say, CCC. Okay, so when I refresh, okay, so you can notice significant change in the p tag color as well. Okay, so this is how the selectors are working. So let us try to explore more. Let's say we have this another element, small tag. Okay, now we will try to apply some common code to this small tag. Okay, so what I can do is I can just simply write small. Okay, and then maybe I'm just writing, let's say, font size equal to 9 pixels. Okay, when I refresh, you can notice that both font size have got reduced. And to overwrite it, what I can do is I can specify font size to the second element, or the the element where we have specified the ID as, let's say, 20 pixel. Okay, so when I refresh, okay, so what has happened over here is, first this particular rule was applied. Okay, and then this rule was overwritten by this particular code again. Okay, so this is how the same element can be selected by different selectors. Okay, but the most recent, that is from the bottom, whichever is the latest rule, that will be applied first. Okay, this is, I'm talking in terms of external files. Even let's say for this particular code, in case you have certain inline code, so that rule will be applied because that will have the higher precedence. Now let us continue. We'll check that let's say we will talk about this image and h1. Okay, so we will try to select this HTML element via TD. Okay, so how we can do that? So what I'll do, I'll just remove this part for now. Okay, when I refresh, it should change the color. Then I'm writing TD, then h1. Okay, and then let's say I'm writing code as, but let us try to do it for the h2 element because we have two h2 element. Okay, so I'm writing color colon hash EEE. Okay, so when I refresh, okay, you can notice that the color has got changed. It has selected the both the h2 elements. Okay, now what we can do is we can just try to specify that if it is coming along with the sibling. Okay, so I'll just change the h1 element here, h2 as h1. Okay, now we need to ensure that it should come with the sibling code, so I'm just writing image plus. Okay, so when I hit refresh, okay, you can see that it has got changed. Otherwise, this was just to explain this option. Otherwise, even with this, it would have worked the same way. But because I just wanted to explain you about the plus symbol, so I gave that example. Now let us continue. We'll try to learn about the attribute and value type of selector. Okay, so what we should do, we should now try to take this value, okay, and maybe try to display a border to this element. Okay, so we'll say wherever v align is equal to top is set, that particular element will be selected. So I'm writing like this. Okay, and then my CSS code, let's say I'm writing border 1 pixel solid, and the color of the border will be 333. Okay, so what this is telling is that I need to have a border with the border width as 1 pixel. It will be in solid form, and the color is this. Okay, so when I refresh, okay, so wherever I have mentioned this attribute and value, all those 3D elements have got selected. These two did not get select because there this value was not specified. Okay, now if we want to minimize the number of elements are getting selected, what we can do is maybe add, let's say, class to this only single element like this. I'm just writing, let's say, single here. Okay, and you can see there is no change, but when I say element with class name single and this particular value key pair, okay, so when I refresh, so nothing has got selected. Maybe I need to write it like this. Okay, so what it is telling is that the selector is class name with this attribute and value, only that particular element will be selected. Okay, when I say space, so that has a different meaning. Okay, it says that a class name and then any other element inside of this particular element having this as the value pair. Okay, so I think we have seen most of the common selector element that we need to be aware of. Just to add one more point, whatever the selectors that we are specifying, these selectors are also used in similar fashion in jQuery as well. So this was all for the selectors and how style sheets can be applied, or how can CSS rules can be applied. So what we are going to do is now we are going to continue with more CSS properties, okay, or more styling properties that we can use. So color, border, these are very common CSS rules. We are going to now look around the margins and how margins can be effectively used. Alright, so now we will continue with margin, and margin is very important aspect of CSS. So what basically a margin is? So when we have one HTML element, so this HTML elements claims a certain area around it. Okay, we can assume this as a box. Okay, so even if it is a text, something like this, so even this will create a virtual box around it. Okay, so to all these elements, okay, like let's say you have a text or you have a div element. Okay, like big div element like this, and then maybe you have a small element inside this, maybe a b tag. So we can create margins around a certain elements. Okay, so this area is basically called as margin. Okay, so by default all the elements are top and left aligned. Okay, so when I say element like this, okay, assuming this to be my parent element, and when I create one child inside it, so the child will be aligned to top and left. Okay, so by default maybe it will have 0 or a certain margin or certain default margin. So this is usually defined by the rendering engine. So you can reset this using the star selector, and maybe you can write margin 0 to all elements like this. Okay, so this is margin colon 0 px. But there could be cases wherein you are required to, let's say, add margin of, let's say, 10 pixel or 100 pixel with your parent element. Okay, so in that case you can make use of margin. Just to take this study further, in case you have one more element, okay, like this. Okay, so in this case the margin will be applied in respect to the sibling. Okay, so when you write top margin for this second element, so this margin will be relative to the first sibling that is there. Okay, so this is how the margin is going to work. So to identify margin, always try to visualize every HTML element as a box. Okay, so it will make your understanding, or it will make writing CSS code or CSS property related to margin easier for you. When a element adds margin, okay, so this area, okay, is usually a transparent area, so it won't display any color over there. Okay, and you can specify margins for top, left, bottom, and right. So you can write it like this. You can write the property name as margin, okay, and then colon, you can specify the margin in percentage or pixels. So something like this, let's say 0 pixel. So this 0 pixel margin will be applied to all four sides, okay. But in case you want exclusive margins to be applied to different directions, let's say maybe on top you want 10 pixel and on bottom let's say you want 100 pixels, and let's say on your left you want 20 pixel and here you want let's say 40 pixel. So in that case you can write top, right, bottom, left, okay. To remember this, what you can do is you can memorize it like this: top, then right, then bottom, and then left, okay. So this is basically clockwise. So this is top, right, bottom, and left. So in our example, what we can do is we need to write 10 pixels, then right is 40 pixels, then bottom is 100 pixels, and then left is 20 pixels. So this is something that you can write when you want margin information applied to all four sides differently. Alternatively, you can specify in the pairings like this. So if you write, let's say 10 pixel space 20 pixels, so this 10 pixels will be applied to top and bottom, and 20 pixels will be applied to right and left, okay. So for your element, 10 pixels will be applied at top and bottom, and 20 pixels will be applied to left and right. There could be instances wherein you will be required to write margins to only single side, or maybe two or three sides. So in that case you can write individual margin properties like this: margin hyphen top, margin hyphen right, bottom, and left. So in case you just require to write only these two, so maybe you can skip these, or you can write any one of these to a selector that you have, let's say a class selector given as the example over here, okay. So just notice that you are just writing the side name along with the margin, and you have a dash in between, so your property name becomes margin dash top, and so on. So here is one example wherein you have specified all these sides and you have used margin here, and then we have one example. So inside div element I have written kodegod, and then I have ahref, and then I have written .com. So this block as the word over here has a hyperlink to which I have specified these margins, okay. So just to give example how it is going to apply, so this is how the margin will be applied. So obviously this is not something that you will see on the screen, but this is just to make you understand. I have applied a color over here. So the selector is mar over here, mar, and this hyperlink is being selected because of the class name is mar, and to which I am applying these styles. So again, this is your top, right, bottom, and left, okay. So you can see this is the default box of your HTML element, and it has created these margins on all sides with its parent. Similar to margin, we have something called as padding. So padding is slightly different. Only difference is that the padding is inside of the element, okay. So if this is your element and you have another element, so when you apply padding to this element, okay, so this space will be created, okay. So this is the padding, okay. So this is example of padding. So padding is applied to this outer element, and in case of margin you have this inner element who can set the margin, okay. So in this second example you are required to apply margin to this element, okay, to create spacing like this, and in the other example you are specifying padding to the outer element or to the parent element. So padding is generally used when you have some content, and this basically creates spacing between the box itself, okay. So let's say you have element like this. Let us say this is a div tag and you have certain text written inside it. let's say kodegod. So by default it may be displayed something like this, kodegod, but you can add padding like this. Okay, maybe some padding on all these sides, and then it will create this space. Okay, again the padding is invisible, but in case this outer element has some color attached to it, then this space will be displayed in the same color. Okay, so padding is basically affected by the background color. Now again, just to re-clarify, we are talking about this single element, so there is no parent in this particular case. This is the same element which has certain text inside it, and we are adding padding to this particular element. Similar to margin, we can set padding on each of the sides, and we can specify padding to all the sides using padding property. You can use the colon and specify the padding that you want. Let's say I'm writing 0 pixel over here, or maybe you can write 10 pixels. And if you want padding different on all the sides, you can write again in this format. Or to apply your padding to top and bottom and right and left as the pairs, then you can write something like this. So your syntax would be something like this: padding colon, let's say 10 pixel. So 10 pixel will be applied to the top and bottom, and let's say 20 pixel, then this 20 pixel will be applied to the right and left. And you can also write it individually like this. So you can write padding hyphen top, then right, bottom and left. So you can write the properties individually like this. So we are taking the similar example. So if you notice in this particular example, what is happening is this is the same element. Okay, so here this becomes your element. Okay, so this is the whole element, this was just your text, and this padding is basically created using this style statement or because of this particular property. So I think this both padding and margin are really important. I think you'll understand this concept better when we are going to try hands-on decoding. So I will take good examples on margin and padding. So the next is the borders. So borders basically defines a border area of an element. So if this is your element, okay, let's say you have one div element and you have certain text written inside that div element, let's say x, y, z. So when you apply this border property, so a border will be drawn for that particular element. Important thing to notice is that in case you have applied certain padding to this element, so the border will be applied outside of your padding. Okay, so assuming this will be the padding. Okay, there are some sub properties for the border property. You have border width, wherein you can specify the width of this border. Okay, so assuming if this is the 1 pixel, then when you write 2 pixels, so a darker border or the border with higher width will be displayed. Okay, like this. Then you have border style, it can be solid, then it can be dash, or it can be dotted like this. So these types we'll see in the upcoming slides. And then you have border color. So you can set standard HTML color, maybe in hash format, in hex format, or in the predefined keyword sets that the color has. So we will be checking about colors or the color codes in great detail in the upcoming slides. So as we talk about the border style, so these are the default border styles. When you say none, so of course no border will be displayed. You can have a hidden border as well. Then you have dotted border like this. Then you have dashed border, so like this. Then you have a solid line like this. When you say double, so two solid borders will be displayed. And then you have groove border, which basically displays a 3D grooved border, and this basically depends on the border color value. So we'll check this with the help of an example. Then you have one ridge border, again it depends on the border color value. Then you have inset, So you can have 3D inset border. Again, this depends on the border color value. Similarly, you can have outset. So for the 3D border styles, basically what they are saying is border would be like this. When you specify inset or outset, so that the 3D direction would be displayed accordingly. So I think, this is something again we can, try to understand with the help of one example. So here are few examples. So we can specify the border styles like this. So I'm assuming that we have one HTML element that is a p tag, and these are few classes applied to these different p tags. Okay, so this is how no border, when I specify none, this is how it will be displayed. This is for the dotted, this is dashed, and this is a solid border. Okay, but if you notice, what additional that we have done is we have specified the different styles on each of the sides. So again, this is top, right, bottom, and left. So if you notice that this is 10 pixel, okay, this is 15 pixel, and this is the thicker border, and this is the border with medium width. Then you have a double border. Okay, so we just need to specify double like this. So this is the class that actually is applied to the HTML element, and this is how the property value is set. Okay, now between ridge and groove, you'll notice a slight difference. So maybe, by increasing width of this particular border, you'll be able to understand how, this is technically displayed. So groove is basically, if you notice that it is the color goes something like this. Okay, and in case of ridge, it is in reverse. Okay, so if you just notice, the outer border has the black color first, and here this reverse. And when you say inset and outset, so if you notice that the black color is at the top, and here the black color is at the bottom and right. So bottom and right, and here it is top, left. So this is basically how you want to display the element. So when I say something like this, okay, so this is how the 3D effect will be created. So if you say this is the inset, then other one is the outset. Okay, so this is how exactly you want to display the border. But in the modern web technologies, these are very rarely used. So 3D is something that is really, really rarely used for the borders. But there could be cases, or maybe when future UI UX styles changes, or there is some different adaptability related to 3D elements. Maybe this can be really used. The most common ones which are used is the solid with 1 pixel and different colors, and even the dotted and dashed are second commons which are commonly used after the solid border style. Then there are two new properties which are introduced in CSS 3. One is the border radius, wherein you can specify border radius, which basically displays border like this. So it basically generates rounded corners. So earlier, when this property was not there, to create this rounded corners, what we had to do was create elements like this. Okay, so maybe one element here which will have a image with the rounded corner, and then one particular image will be displayed in the repetitions, and then other element which will display the other rounded corner. Okay, then similarly one vertical image which will display this particular line, and then other one which will be displaying this line, and one corner element which will display this part, and then finally this line. Okay, and another element to display the remaining corner like this. So by this it will display one single border like this. Okay, so you can understand how much this pain was there to create a rounded box. So to display a simple box, we had to create these 8 elements, and then 8 styles, then 8 different images. But now these problems are solved because of one single CSS property, that is border radius. So you can specify your radius width, and a rounded corner will be generated for you. Then we have border image. So what it does, basically it displays one image as the border. So something like this. So this is one image. The image will repeat itself, it will get sliced automatically. It will also get scaled and stretched to fit the size. So we don't have to do much about it, and the border is displayed automatically with the help of the image. So again, something that is rarely used, but it is good to have in case you want to display a border with gradient or the certain color scheme related to your web page or your logo. So in very rare cases, again, you can use the border image. So notice that URL is used over here, and this is how you can specify the URL. So this URL is relative to your CSS page which holds this particular code. Okay, so here no path is specified. That means it will try to search the URL in the same location where this CSS file is residing. Then we'll talk about the colors. So color again is very important aspect of CSS styling. So colors defines color of text content of the given element. You can use colors to define backgrounds of a certain HTML element. So the color values can be in hexadecimal, something like this, which is very commonly used format, because using this you can reach to a specific color that your web page or the HTML element is going to display. Alternatively, you can use the RGB values, which is, I would say, second common, but not necessarily something that the coders will prefer. And the third type is using the keywords like this. Only problem with using this particular keyword is rendering engine will have predefined values in hexadecimals. So you could be using, let's say, 600 as the red color, and maybe some other browser or the rendering engine of the other browser could be using, let's say, 601 or let's say 700 as the color code replacement for the red color. So this is not the standard way of writing color code name. So this is something should be avoided. As we discussed earlier, colors can be applied to borders, outlines, boxes, and text. So if this is one example for CSS wherein I'm going to specify color. So when I say color property, so this particular color will be applied to the HTML element. And then when we say border color, so this color will be applied to the border of the element. And this can be applied to the outline color of your HTML element. Again, something that I will be explaining with the help of example. So moving forward, CSS3 also introduced new functional notations that can be set to the color values. One is the rgba format, wherein you specify red, green, and blue, plus you also specify the alpha value to it. So RGB accepts values starting from 0 to 255. So it basically creates multiple combinations of RGB values. So these number of combinations can be created using RGB values. Plus we have alpha value that starts from 0.0 to 1.0. So what alpha does is it creates opacity as well, something like this. Okay, so if you notice this particular example wherein we have specify alpha as 0.3, and in the second example we have alpha as 0.7. So one being the highest value, alpha won't make any difference over here. But if you start lowering the value, so you will have differences like this. Okay, so alpha can be used wherein you are required to display elements as different layers. Okay, so in that case you can definitely make use of RGBA notations. Then we have one HSL notation as well. So HSL basically stands for hue, saturation, and lightness. Hue basically accepts values ranging from 0 to 360. Saturation and lightness accepts value in percentage. 100% saturation means full color. 0% means shade of gray. So if you have let's say red elements in your HTML color, and when you start reducing value of the saturation, so this red will start gradually moving towards the shade of gray. And in case of lightness, 100% is white and 0% is black, 50% is normal. So this is how you can specify these values HSL, and then this first value is U, the second value is saturation, and the third value is lightness. So if you just try to display the same color in RGB format, so you'll have to first identify this color. So again, HSL is not really very common, but in case there could be instances wherein you are required to change saturations and lightness of the image that is already created and uploaded on the production server. So maybe you can just simply add this particular property and set hue and saturation and lightness like this. So this is again something that could be rarely used, not very often. And finally we have hsla as well, which basically stands for hue, saturation, lightness and alpha. We have already seen all these four. We know that 0.0 will make your HTML element almost transparent, and this will make it full opaque, but it is going to use along with the combinations of HSL. So the format is almost similar to HSL, plus we have one alpha property here. Okay, again not very common, but it's good that we are aware about this particular notation. Then we'll talk about the backgrounds. So background basically defines style of the elements. Background properties include background color, then image, how many times you want to repeat the background, or how the background should be repeated, and you can specify the background file using the attachment. And most important is the position, as in where exactly you want the background to be displayed for that particular element. So background color sets a background color for the HTML element. You can set your image using the background image property, and you can repeat the image. This basically helps rendering engine how exactly the background image is styled. So values can be repeat, so the image is repeated horizontally and vertically as well. So this is, let's say, one HTML element, and this is your default image. Okay, so the image will be repeated horizontally and vertically as well. And when you just have, let's say, repeat X, then it can be repeated on the horizontally, that is only on the X axis. And when you say repeat Y, it can be repeated only in the Y. And when you say no repeat, so image will not be repeated, it will be displayed only once, like this. So even if your element is big enough, then your image will be displayed something like this, it won't be repeated. So let us take one example. So when I say background color, then this color will be applied to the background, and I can also specify the background image, and I can specify the URL. So this particular image will be displayed as the background for your body, that is your complete web page. You can also specify the image and make it repeat. So in this case, it will be just displayed once. So here you are saying that repeat X, so the image will be repeated horizontally. So talking about the background attachment, so it basically determines whether the background image is fixed or can be scrolled. This is very important, wherein you want the image to be scrolled along with the element, or when you basically have a longer page. So when you say fix, so the image will not be rotating along with the whole web page, it will be fixed at its location. And when you say scroll, it will be scrolled automatically. So in order for this to work, you need to specify your image like this, and then you can specify your attachment. You can write fixed or scrolled over here. Then you have background position, wherein it controls position of your background image. So default position is 0 0. So if, let's say, this is your element, okay, and you have a small image, So this image will be displayed something like this. So this particular location is the 00 location, and your image will be aligned here automatically. This is the default behavior. Or otherwise you can specify values to this element. So again, when you say bottom, so image will be set to the bottom, something like this. And when you say right, it will be displayed something like this. So this is something that you can specify. You can alternatively specify center. So when you say center, so image will be displayed over here. So I think this behavior is something that you can quickly check in the browser itself. So in the hands-on coding example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate how you can quickly change these values in the browser itself, and try to understand how the style can behave differently when you change the values of a certain property. So let us continue. Finally, we have one shortened property for the background wherein you can merge these values, something like this. So background is the shortcut way. So I specify the color for this background, then plus I have the image, and I also specify that I'm not going to repeat. Background attachment is fixed, and I'm also specifying position for this particular image. So here what is going to happen, so if let's say this is the element to which I'm going to apply this particular image, so starting from this location, so somewhere here this is the 100 and 100 location. Okay, so the image will be rendered over here. Okay, so assuming let's say your image is like this, so to all the remaining part, okay, this color will be displayed, your image will be here. Okay, and it will not be repeated because of this particular property. So this is how it will be rendered. Additionally, in CSS3 we have one more property, that is background size. It specifies the size of the background image. So in the earlier versions of CSS, whatever the default size your particular image has, that will be displayed as it is. But with the help of background size, you can change it with the help of specifying values in pixels or percentage. You can also specify it with the help of special keywords as auto, contain, and cover. So here is the syntax for it. You can specify the background size, and you can specify the keyword over here. Alternatively, you can write values in pixels as well. Let's say 50% or let's say 100 pixels. So here what is going to happen, let's say even if your image is of let's say 200 pixels in width and 200 pixel in height, okay, and your outer element is let's say 50 pixels, okay, even in that case this background image will be reduced to fit to your parent element. Okay, so this is something that rendering engine will do automatically. So again, it depends on how you write your code or how you define your CSS properties using this particular CSS property. There's one more property, that is the background clip. So it specifies whether background extends into border or not. It takes three values. One is the border box, then padding box, and then content box. So here is the example for this. Background clip is the property name and this is the value. So here is one example. Okay, so what it is going to do is when you say border box, so it will draw box around the background that we have drawn. So this is the example wherein it is border box, and when you have padding box, so it is creating padding outside of your background element. So this is your whole background element and it has created this padding box. And when you say content box, so your whole background element, it is like this, and one box will be drawn outside the whole element. Okay, we also have one more property as background origin, where it specifies positioning area of the background image. So again, it takes three values: border box, padding box, and content box. It is same as the outputs are almost similar to the background clip. So you can see here in the example, I have specified background origin as content box. So this is how the output will be displayed. We can also add multiple backgrounds to your HTML element. So here in this particular example, we have specified two URLs, if you notice over here, with the help of a comma operator. So this is basically is useful when you have to create multiple layers and those will be layered on one another. So the first value which comes before the comma will be on the top and the other one would be on the bottom. When you have to specify the background color, so you can specify that in the last value or the value which just comes before the semicolon. So here what is happening is basically we have two background images. One is the this particular background image, the one which is in the red color, and this is the another image that is being layered above this particular image. So this is how we can set multiple backgrounds. So let us try to understand all the properties that we have seen so far with the help of live examples. Let me try to write some hands-on code so you can understand these concepts easily. Alright, so now let us try to learn about these properties that we have seen so far with the help of few examples. So first of all, what I have done now is I have changed the theme or the color options for the Sublime text so that the code becomes more readable on the mobile devices as well. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to create one structure. So this is the HTML folder, so these are our previous files. So I have created one CSS folder. Inside this folder I have my content folder where I have this sample file. So I'm going to create my samples related to CSS inside of this particular folder. So I'll just save this file into that folder. So inside this CSS folder, I'm going to save my HTML file first. So let's say I'm writing the name as index.html and I'm writing my default script. So let's say I'm writing CSS example. Okay, I'm going to save this file. So let us just first try whether it is displaying something. So I'm writing, let's say, test, and let us open this file inside Chrome browser. So let's say I'm writing index.html. So let me save this file first. Okay, and when I refresh, so test has appeared over here, so it is rendering it properly. So let me just resize this windows, and yeah, so our code structure is now ready. So we wanted to check with the new CSS properties that we have seen, that is margin, border, padding and background. So let us try to create few HTML elements. So I'm creating one div element. Okay, inside this div element, let's say I have some text written as kodegod.com, and then we have one small tag. There I'm writing, let's say, coding is fun, and when I refresh, so this text is displayed over here. Okay, now we'll just introduce our CSS as well over here. So I'm going to write the link tab. Okay, and I'm going to give the reference as stylesheet.css, and we need to create this file. So let me create a new file. So command is Control N for that. So in this file I'm just going to write, let's say, star and let's say font family colon Helvetica comma Arial as the second line of font. So if you can notice that the text is completely in white color, because the Sublime now doesn't know that what exactly type of code we are writing, because of we have not specified the file name. So let me just save the file first. So I'm going to save this file as stylesheet.css. Okay, and as soon as I save the file with extension CSS, you can see that it has formatted the code. So this particular property is telling the browser rendering engine that the font that I'm going to use for all HTML elements is going to be Helvetica, and in case the Helvetica is missing font, then Arial will be applied. Okay, so if you can check, there's no significant change. The reason is the spelling of Helvetica is wrong. So this E is extra. So when I refresh, there's something wrong. Okay, I think we have not saved this file. If you just notice this icon, so this index.html is not saved. So let me just save that file and hit the refresh. So you can now notice the difference in the font type. Okay, all right. So now what we will do is we will apply one class name to this particular div. So let's say I'm going to write it as block. Okay, and then inside of style sheet I'm going to write properties for this particular class. So for class, we know that we are required to write dot as a selector symbol, and then we can write block. So this becomes definition for my CSS class. So I'm going to write rule as, let's say, margin colon 100 pixel. Okay, so when I hit refresh, so you can notice that this margin has got added over here. Now we're not able to notice any difference over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write background color to this particular CSS. So let's say I'm writing red as the background color. Okay. So when I hit refresh, you can notice that a background color is applied to the div element, but on all the side this 100 pixel margin is also added. Okay, so if you can notice that this right, bottom, top and left margins are being added. So if I remove this line, okay, and refresh, so you can notice that this margin has got completely removed, but you can notice this small amount of margin is there because the rendering engine is having this default look for the div classes. So to reset margin for all the windows, what we can do is we can just add margin equal to 0 pixel in these first selector that we have, so universal selector. So when I hit refresh, you can notice that it is edge to edge now. Let's say we require this margin. Let's say, just to understanding, I'm going to write margin colon, let's say 50 px. Okay, and when I hit refresh, so again this margin has got added. Now we are doing this purposely to help you understand how exactly the margin is getting added. So let me just add p element. Okay, and inside of this I am writing lorem ipsum. Okay, so when I hit refresh, let me cancel this box, translate Latin. Okay, so when I hit refresh, so this text is there, but you can notice that this additional margin is something that has got added between this particular div tag and this p tag. Okay, so if we just try adding border to all these elements, let us see how this is going to look. So let's say I am specifying border to the p tag and the div tag also. Okay, so this is going to get applied to all the p and div tags, but in our case, because we just have a single p and single div element, so it's not an issue. But ideally you should not be writing code like this, or you can write something like this. Okay, because we have class assigned to our div, so we can write div.block, and then let's say to this p also we specify one class, or let's say we write id equal to paragraph. Okay, let me just copy this part. So when I go here, I'm writing like this. Okay, so what this signifies is, to the p tag, if this has id as paragraph, then whatever CSS property tools that we are going to add over here will be applied, and the same set of rules will be also applied to the div elements. In fact, all the div elements wherever the class block is applied. Okay, so I'm just going to write one border to it. So border, let's say 1 pixel, and it is going to be a solid border, and I'm going to specify color as, let's say, black, which is 000. And when I hit refresh, so you can notice that to both the elements the border has got applied. So let me just increase width of this border. So I'm making it 10 pixel. Okay, so this is how our borders are getting displayed over here. Okay, so far so good. I'm just going to introduce you to one more tool that is really useful, and it will be helpful for you to quickly understand the CSS properties very quickly. So what we are going to use is, we are going to use inbuilt element of the Chrome browser. What we need to do is, we need to just select an element and click on inspect. So it opens this particular tool. So what this tool does is, when you are doing this UI development or you are building your web pages, you can select individual elements like this. Okay, it will select the HTML part related to that element. It will also display the style sheets that is applied to the element. Okay, so in case when I select this particular element, so this is our p tag with id paragraph. Okay, so it is displayed. You can open this element and you can see the text which is inside of this particular box, and you can also see the CSS and how the margin, border and padding is applied to those elements. It will also display the calculated size of that element in width and height. So 836 is the width and 72 is the height. So to view your changes on temporary basis, what you can do is, we can just modify these values. I will just double click over here on this 10, and I'm just going to modify it with, let's say, 5. Okay, so when I press enter, you can notice that width of the top border has got reduced. You can also try adding padding like this. So I'm writing padding, let's say 50 pixels. Okay, so you can notice that it has added this padding over here. Okay, we know that we can apply this padding to the individual sides. So I can write padding top, and the padding will be applied to the top side only. So right, bottom and left, it is not technically considered over here. We can write these properties in pairs. So if only single value is specified, that means to all these sides it will be applied. And if we just specify two values, so let's say 50 pixel and 10 pixels, so this 50 pixel will be applied to the top and bottom, and 10 pixel will be applied to the left and right. Okay, like this. So you can just cross verify over here. So 50-50 is applied at the top and bottom, and 10 is applied to the left and right. This inspect window is really important when you're going to create a lot of elements and apply different CSS styles to it. It also has a console window, but this is something that we will see at the time of learning about JavaScript. For simplicity, I'm just writing 2 plus 2, so it is giving me output as 4. So you can write your JavaScript or jQuery code here also. Important thing to understand or to be aware of is that all the changes that we are doing here are basically temporary in nature. If we just refresh this page, all these changes will be gone. So these are our default pages. So these are the actual files that we have saved. So whatever trials that you're doing here, you can copy those. So let me just try writing, let's say instead of solid, I am writing dotted as the border, and I'm writing, let's say, padding, and I'm specifying all 4 values over here. Let's say 10 pixel to the top, then let's say 20 pixel to the right, then let's say 30 pixel to the bottom, and 40 pixel to the left. Okay, so I have written this. Then let me add margin as well. So margin, I'm just writing two values. So top and bottom will be, let's say, 10 pixel, and 20 pixel will be applied to the left and right hand side. So this is how I have added the margin. So I'm just going to copy this code from here, okay, and I'm going to paste this code here like this, okay. So when I hit refresh, so you can notice that these particular changes have got applied. Only thing is that this border has not turned into dotted because I did not copy this part, so solid has remained as it is. So I'm just going to write here dotted and hit refresh. So you can notice the changes are appearing now. So one good thing about this tool is that you can quickly play around this values over here. So if I just write border, then I can see all the different properties that I can set over here. It will also show me all the possible values altogether to it. So we have seen these particular options related to property value border. So this is how the dash will look. This is how the dotted lines will look. This is the double line. Then we have a groove variable. So let me increase width of this border. So I'm writing border width equal to, let's say, 10 pixels. Okay. So when we are going to check these values, so when I say groove, so it will have this groovy look to these borders. Similarly, let us play around with the other values. So we just need to scroll down a little bit. Yeah, so this is how the dashed border will look. This is the dotted, this is double, this is the groove border, this is hidden border, that is, it will be hidden, it will not be displayed. Then inset is the the 3D look that it can give to your border, and outset is just opposite to it. Okay, so if you notice, this darker border is coming to the right and bottom. So in case of inset, it will come to the top and left. Okay, like this. Okay, and then we have medium, none, and this. So here it has a different 3D look than inset and outset. You can notice that the middle edge is actually coming out. So this is how that illusion is displayed over here. Solid is the default. Okay, this thin and thick are not working somehow in this particular case. So sometimes it also depends how actually properties are being used. So sometimes a certain property may not work because of the other property that is being set to the particular element. So let me try adding one image. Let me just refresh. Obviously this, whatever the changes that we have seen so far will be vanished. So this is how our current code is. So let me add one image on this particular element. So I'm just going to add the image inside of this p tag. Image, we have stored one image in the content directory slash kodegod.png. So this is our image. Yeah, so this image is quite huge in size. If I just open this image in a new tab, you can notice that size is quite huge. It's 960 by 540. So let me just reduce size of this particular image by specifying width. So let's say width equal to 25% only. Okay, so what we are going to do is we are going to move this image out of this particular element P, and let us try to apply this image as the background for this whole element. Okay, so let me just cut this line and I'm just going to paste it just above the body tag. Okay, so you can see that it has come out of the element, and then for this P tag I'm going to write the background image code. So you can rewrite like this. So I have created another definition for this p tag. So you can definitely write like this. So I'm writing background image, then I can specify the URL. It is going to be same as the one that we used, content slash kodegod.png, and when I hit refresh, so you can notice that this background image has appeared over here. So because the text color is also black, so some part we're not able to see. So let us try to change that. So I'm writing color equal to, let's say, white for now. Okay, so correct. So now it is displaying it, and then what we will do is we will reduce size of this image using property background size. Let's say I'm writing 25%. Okay, by default images will be repeated like this, so these images are getting tiled horizontally and vertically. Suppose we just want these images to be repeated only horizontal, so what we can do is we can write background repeat is equal to repeat x. Okay, so it will repeat it only horizontal. So you can see that the second line is not getting displayed now. So let me just reduce size to, let's say, 5%. Okay, so you can see that only single line has displayed now. And similarly, when I write, let's say, repeat y, then only vertically it will repeat itself like this. When I say no repeat, so it will be displayed only once, and it won't be repeated either horizontally or vertically. So when I hit refresh, it has just displayed it once like this. Okay, we have few more properties like the position. So position, what we can do is we can specify it pixel by pixel. So let's say I'm writing 100 pixel space 100 pixel. Okay, when I hit refresh, so this will be its 0 0 location. It has shifted more towards the x and y axis. So 100 and 100 is the size, so that is how it has come over here. You can also specify in terms of standard keywords, like I can say, let's say top, so it will be aligned to the top middle. I can say top left, so it will be aligned to the top left. I can write top right. Okay, it is being displayed like this. Or I can write, let's say, bottom center, so it is displayed bottom and aligned centrally. Let us check few more properties. So we have seen size, repeat, color as well, because this particular red color at the top is being created like this. Okay, let us talk about the colors. Okay, so we have seen different color formats. Okay, so this is one way of writing, but it is not standard because this red could be slightly different in terms of different browsers. So it's always better to write HTML codes like this. So let's say I'm writing 300. So this is going to be the color for this. It is quite dark, so let me put one a little bright color. So let's say F9 and 0. So when I hit refresh, so this is how it is being displayed. So alternate way of writing this is the writing HSA, or sorry, hsla. Okay, so here we can specify hue, saturation, lightness and alpha levels. So let's say I write 20 comma 50% comma 50% comma 0.5. So when I hit refresh, so you'll notice slight difference it is going to make in the background color. So another way to play around this is by selecting that element and clicking here. Okay, and it will display you all the values. Okay, so you can play around like this. So let's say I'm changing the alpha level like this. Okay, and I'm changing, let's say, hue level like this. So you can notice the changes in the color are being made. Okay, so I think fair enough. I think these concepts are quite easy to understand. We can also check about the rgba, wherein we can specify RGB colors along with the alpha values. So let's say I'm just going to write 200 comma 50 comma 30. So these are the red, green and blue levels of the RGB colors. So we know that the value starts from 0 to 255 for all these three parameters. So when I hit refresh, you can notice that this color is being displayed. I can also write alpha level like this, let's say 0.5. So you can notice difference in the color now. Okay, it has become a little transparent. So again we can play around with this color code system like this. So background color is specified over here. Okay, so we can change the alpha level like this. Okay, and in case you like this particular code, so you can of course copy this line like this and paste it here. Okay, and hit refresh. So these changes are now permanent. So we have seen most of the important CSS properties. So let me quickly create few more samples which will cover the other CSS properties as well, and I can explain those properties to you.